Hi, friends. I hope you are well. I'm well. Today's a beautiful sunny winter day in Chicago. For those of you who live in warm places, this is a turtleneck and this is a scarf, and I wear them all winter because I'm terminally cold. So, why do you live in Chicago, you might ask? Good question. I don't know the answer. I hope you're well. Today, we are going to talk about hormones. Woohoo. The hows and the whys of their effects on our voices. Now, I know that I'm a little bit out of my lane talking about hormones. I mean, if you know me, you know I just love anat and phys stuff, anatomy and physiology stuff in general. But usually I talk about popular style, singing for popular styles, or I talk about neuroscience, or I talk about the intersection of those two things. So this is not exactly what I typically talk about, but I feel like it's not that far out of my lane. It's just a little out of my lane. And it's interesting and it's important and we all need to know about it. So that's why I'm talking about it today. So maybe you've been noticing it. I mean, I have been noticing. That's part of the reason I'm talking about it today is that people have been, talking about this a little bit in voice professional circles, right? The forums and the groups and the organizations. And you might have thought to yourself, wait, what? Hormones? What are you talking about? Or you might have thought, this is new information. Tell me what you have. Or you might have thought, Lord have mercy, if you wanted to hear about hormones, you could have talked to me. I mean, most of us have dealt with the whole hormone situation either personally or vicariously. So I know a little something about this subject. I mean, I did before. I knew a little bit. But last week, I took kind of a deep dive into research papers and videos and stuff like that. And I would love to share every nerdy, exciting little thing that I learned, but I won't. You're welcome. I will only tell you the things that are pertinent to you as a voice teacher. You as a voice teacher or coach, because I want you to have this information to add to your existing awesomeness. So stay with me. We will talk about what happens to voices and what to do about those things. I am Meredith Colby. I am the author of Money Notes, How to Sing High, Loud, Healthy, and Forever, which introduces neurovocal, an approach to teaching voice and singing that is based on neuroscience, singing for popular styles. Again, I like to stay in my lane. I teach professional development classes for voice teachers and coaches. And actually, I am running this year, I have 2 small classes of neurovocal teacher training and certification. The first one filled up so quickly, I can't even believe it. The second one is not filled up yet, but you can still get in on it. And if you're on my mailing list and you check your email, check your inbox from me this weekend, you will get an extra $100 off the registration price. So if you're not on my email list, you still have time to get on my email list. And it's a great class, you guys. People love it. It's really, really good. And there's nothing like it out there, if I do say so myself, which I just did. We have a little bit in front of us today. I will try to keep it reasonably short, as I have been trying to do recently. But if you hear anything that you would like to add to, that you have questions about, that you want to take issue with, put it in the chat. I would love to see it, either now, live, or later, or on YouTube later. You can put it in the chat below. And of course, thumbs and hearts and all the stuff really helps me with the algorithm. So if you would be generous and just click the thumbs or the hearts, I sure do appreciate it. What else do we have today? Oh, my trigger. Oh, I have 2 freebies today. So I have the really for huge nerds freebie. If you are a huge nerd, you can put hormones in the chat. And you will get a link to some of the research, the more pertinent research papers that I found. I weeded them out, and the summary and like my little comment on it. So if you're a huge nerd, that's for you. If you are not a huge nerd, you can put tween in the chat, and you will get a link to my blog post, which is called Handle with Care, Teen Voices. Something about teen voices. I don't remember what the subtitle was, but it's about interacting with young women in particular whose voices are changing. So you have your choice, huge nerd or not huge nerd. What else? Oh, okay. Oh no, I don't want that yet. I'm going to leave that up there. There we go. Or maybe just that. Look at me playing with things. I think I'm going to leave that up there because it's colorful and attractive. Now, let's talk about hormones. Why do we want to talk about hormones? Here's why. Because we all have them, and we know that they do stuff to our bodies. We know they are more or less active at different times in our lives and even different times of the month. As most of us know, some people do not experience that effect, but most of us do. Am I right? So as voice professionals, we have experienced the effects of hormones directly, maybe on our own bodies, and indirectly, and maybe both. So let's take a look at why that is. Why do hormones affect our voices? So typically, not always, but typically, we can tell the difference between a person who grew up with an estrogen-influenced body versus an androgen or testosterone-influenced body. The reason we can tell the difference is because of secondary sex characteristics. Now, these are physical traits that are influenced by hormones that are not directly tied to reproduction. So that would be a primary sexual characteristic, primary sex characteristic, right? Secondary sex characteristics are things that happen, but we don't need them to make more of us. So if your body is flooded with testosterone when you are a teenager, you are going to have broader shoulders and thicker muscle mass and hair growing out of your body and things like that. If your body is flooded with estrogen when you are an adolescent, you are probably going to develop a fatty layer under your skin. You are going to develop breasts. You are going to develop wider hips, maybe. So the secondary sex characteristic that we care about is the voice, because yes, it is. It is a secondary sex characteristic, the voice. The connective tissue of your vocal folds has these little receptors for hormones. And whether those receptors are scooping up lots and lots of hormones or not so much hormonal information will be reflected in how the voice behaves when that's happening. So I'm going to remind you, hold on, I'm going to throw out my trigger one more time if you're just joining me. If you want some of the research papers that I looked at for this, put hormones in the chat. If you want to read a blog post about how to handle tween voices, put tween in the chat. Now, later, doesn't matter. If you're on YouTube, in the comments below, no, description, in the description, not the comments below, you will find those things. So, back here we go. All right. Okay. So the times that we are most affected by our, oh, there's Deborah. Hi, Deborah. The times that we are most affected by hormonal levels in the body are during adolescence, during menses, and during menopause. So as in the rest of our lives, women have it harder. What is the deal? So what happens with androgen receptors is that they increase the muscle mass. So they will also increase the size of the organ itself. So someone who is strongly influenced by testosterone is going to get a deeper voice because bigger instrument and more muscle mass. Now, I'm going to jump ahead to menopause. We're going to come back to estrogen in teens in a second. But I'm going to jump ahead to menopause because this also happens in menopausal women. When the estrogen levels drop, which is what happens in menopause, it's practically the definition of menopause is our natural estrogen levels begin to diminish. Those androgen receptors are still there and our bodies are still making androgen. So what happens with menopausal women, there are other symptoms which we will talk about at another time, but very essentially is we get more low notes. We can hit lower notes. We get a different kind of a richness to our voices, and we may or may not lose high notes. So some people do, some people don't. I lost a few, but I've worked with clients who have only increased their range with menopause. So again, it's very individual. It is universal and also very individual. So that's the menopause thing. And then in adolescence, and this is kind of what the blog post is about, is when the body is flooded with estrogen. And our tween students, one of the main characteristics or the main side effects of that is a little bit of edema in the vocal folds. And so what happens with the result of that is that the sound is a little airy. It's really hard for there to be a very clean adduction, and that's okay because it's going to go away. It's just what it is for now. So so it's just what it is. The other interesting thing about androgens versus estrogen progesterone, is that with testosterone, it tends to happen over a very short timeline, like between 2 and 12 months, very short. The estrogen thing can take anywhere from a year to 3 years. I've even worked with people who I swear it would be more than 3 years, but the data said 3 years. So I will repeat that, but about 3 years. So for girls, that transition is slower, takes longer. That's how it is. So we just have to know that's happening, that our vocal folds are going to reflect the hormonal balances in our body. And then, of course, if you've worked with women, you know that it's very typical for the woman's voice to behave a little bit differently the day before her period and the first day of her period. Right in there, they get an estrogen, or is it progesterone surge at that time, and so the voice behaves a little bit differently. Sometimes they don't even notice it. Sometimes it really bothers them. So you've probably seen that if you've been teaching any length of time with anybody who's over 12. Now, there's another hormone that I want to talk about, and that is cortisol. Cortisol. There we go. Cortisol, our stress hormone. And you've read a lot about cortisol, especially since the pandemic. But it is a hormone. Now, we don't know for sure if human beings have receptors for cortisol on the vocal folds. Here's why. In the research that is done, it must be done on cadavers, because you can't take tissue from a living human. It's just not nice. So we can't do that. So we don't know for sure. They have seen that they've found receptors for the 3 hormones that I mentioned. They have not found hormones for cortisol, though they have not ruled it out. And here is why. There are 2 reasons. One is, fun fact for the day, rats have very similar vocal folds to humans. So for your next game of Trivial Pursuit, if that comes up, yes, rats have very similar vocal folds to ours, and they have found cortisol receptors on the rat's vocal folds. And also, when there has been some, because we have better measuring systems now, there was a really good study on women's voices that used sonic information, electronic information, and physiological markers. So they can't really take the tissue and say, what do we got in here? But they can listen and see the result of phonation at different times of life and at different times of the month and under different circumstances. So that, and that's actually in the rats. Thanks, Derek. Rats. And so that is actually in the download, the research paper download, the one about the rats. I'm pretty sure. If it's not, I'll add it. It was kind of interesting. So I personally, as a voice professional, have not only experienced personally the effect of stress on my voice, but I have seen it many, many times in my clients as you have probably also. We know that stress affects our voice. I'm going to go out on a limb and say it's probably fair to assume, it's probably fair for us to speculate that there are indeed hormone receptors for cortisol on the vocal folds, and that could be and probably is a main reason why we hear stress affecting our ability to phonate with the consistency and agility that we would like to experience. So again, it's rats, it's not us, but I'm going there. I'm going there, people. Just so you know, I'm owning it, but I'm going there. So then we have the question of, well, okay, hormones, great. What do we do? Before I give you my suggestions for dealing with this, I want to remind you that registration for, oh, there's Gabrielle. Gabriella says, rats and us. Oh, God. Now this, I love that this is going to be the takeaway. Deborah says, I'll tell my singers. Thinking, I did all this research and this is what we're going to remember, that rats have similar vocal folds to us. Well, it is what I remembered. I was like, oh. And actually, okay, well, as long as we're talking about rats for a second, I'm going to go on a little tangent and tell you there's this researcher named Sophie Scott at University College in London, and she does research on laughing, and she used rats, and she slowed down, she recorded them, but we can't hear them. They're outside of our ability to hear, and so she recorded them, and then she slowed it down, and you can hear it. And she has videos on YouTube where you can actually hear what rats are saying, and it's kind of cool. They're funny. Rats are funny. Anyway, so I want to remind you that if you want to register for neurovocal certification, teacher training and certification, get thee to my website, meredithcolby.com. Boom, right there. And register, because that class will fill up too. Deborah, I'm talking to you, girlfriend, because I want you in that class. Anyway, so there are things we can do for our clients when they are experiencing these changes based on higher, how do you say it? More hormones running around the old bloodstream. So the things that we can do for them, what can we do for them? Let's talk about that. What we can do. I think this is the most important thing, in my opinion. We can inform them and reassure them, particularly our younger people. When they feel their voices becoming different, hear and feel their voices sounding different, feeling different, behaving differently, it's very concerning to them. And as well it should be. They are only 12, so they don't know that this happens to everybody. And especially the estrogen influenced voices are going to hear themselves going from this clear childlike tone to this kind of fuzzy thing that I call angel voice, because it's, to me, that's what it sounds like. And they're going to be really concerned and very self-conscious, and they're going to think there's something wrong with them. So please, and how many women, oh my gosh, it breaks my heart to imagine how many women just stop singing when they go through menopause because their voices feel and sound different to them, and they don't like it, and they think it's permanent, and they think they can't do anything about it. And so your job is to inform them and reassure them. All of this stuff can be dealt with. It is fixable. It is, we can sing through all this. We can find the joy in our voices through these changes. It is fine. So that's the first thing. Inform them, reassure them. You're the expert. And then the next thing is take it easy, dial it down for lessons and for practice. If you have been working on really fast runs or embellishments, set that aside for a minute and work on sort of the coordinating parts, helping your young people navigate the changes. helping them understand that today it's doing this, but that doesn't mean it's going to be doing that next week. So let's learn to work with what we have today and do the best that we can today, and not push against things and not make things big or fancy or loud, but just be gentle and nurturing to the voice as it is going through a change, right? That's fair. You would do that with anybody, I think. And then, and the other thing is consistency. So this is a really interesting thing. One of the things that I have found, and I think also, oh gosh, was it Nancy Boss? Was it Kate? One of the authors of Singing Through Change. By the way, plug for Singing Through Change. If you are listening to this and you have any interest at all in the singing voice through menopause, the book Singing Through Change is a must. It is a very important book. It really it started the conversation about having an enjoyable singing voice and an enjoyable relationship with our singing voice through and past menopause. So encourage consistency. So a little bit every day. Singers tend to think that we can just not sing for 5 days or a week or whatever, and then just open our mouths and sing, which may have been the case when you were 35. But it's really not the case when you are 12 and 13 or when you are 48 or 55. It's just not how it is. When we're going through those times of change, consistency is key. A little bit every day makes a huge difference during those times. So there we go. Those are my suggestions for you and for you to help your singers through these times when there's a lot of hormonal influx, which causes changes and irregularities in the voice that can feel really disconcerting to your person. It's going to your person, either you or your client. It won't last forever. Inform them and reassure them. Take it easy, dial it down, and encourage consistency. And everybody will be so much happier. Gabriella has a comment. I'm going to pull this up for you to share with you as I read it. And it's over my face, and I don't care. Oh my God, that's right. I was hit very hard by menopause. My voice was a mess, and I thought at the time I was prepared for it, but it wasn't the case. As a voice teacher, it was devastating. It took me a lot of patience, reassuring, and perseverance to get better. Great advice. Thank you for sharing that, Gabriella, because yes, you think, oh, I know all this, but when it's happening to your personal self, it's really upsetting. And it's upsetting to your clients. Our voices are part of our identity. And when they're not behaving the way we expect them to all the time, it's really upsetting. I think Gabriella used the word devastating. I don't think that's too big of a word. I really don't. It can be really devastating. So be that person. Be that person for your singers. Be reassuring. Give them the information. Let them know how it is. I hope this helped you today. Have a great week. Bye-bye.